Hello, 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 my beautiful friends, and welcome to the Secrets of a Witch podcast with me, Sabrina Scott, where I talk about life, love, healing, magic, witchcraft, tarot, spirituality, and everything in between, as one does. So let's just launch right into it. Let's just do that. So today I'm going to be tackling a topic that was requested on Instagram like more than a month ago, and I added it to my little list of podcast topics, and I've kind of just been rolling these topics around in my head and then just like, I don't know, riffing on the ones that feel right and then hitting go. So today's topic is women supporting women. And I think it's a great topic. It's a super interesting topic. And yeah, it's so interesting. It's so juicy. And I'm going to go in a direction that people probably don't think I'm going to go in. So hang on to your seats, buckle your seatbelts, and hopefully remove your I am easily offended hat and throw it out the window. You know, why not? So let's get into it. So I'm pretty sure that the lovely human who suggested this was probably coming at this from a point of view of like, of course women should be supporting other women, like what the fuck is with the hateration between women. Let's just support each other as women, like women to women, let's just do that. And on one hand, I really agree with this, but I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. So like, let's just like, yeah, let's go. I'm like getting ahead of myself. I'm like, where do I even begin? So I think it's true. You know, the person who submitted this question is picking up on something that I think is real. You know, a lot of women get really triggered by other women. A lot of women hate other women for no reason. It's like there can only be one. You know, like I'm a big fan of rap and hip hop, and the attitude is like, oh, there can only be one good female rapper, which is like, makes no fucking sense, right? And so even like among women who date men, it's like there's this weird jealousy and like hateration and like infighting and pettiness and like jealousy that leads to like, I don't know, backstabbing and rage and just envy and people really trying to bring each other down. And this is really unhealthy, fucked up behavior. And it shows like a lack of groundedness within the self for anyone who is doing this. And like, I think this is true for anyone of any gender, but I do think there is something specific about like women doing this to each other that I don't really see with men in the same way. And like, feel free to correct me, but I've had a lot of conversations about this and with a lot of different people, like including with men. And what I've observed is that there is something very specific with the way women tend to perceive other women, right? Whether that's around looks or beauty or talent or success or, you know, whatever. And there is this kind of envy where it's like, if you think a woman is beautiful and successful and talented, you talk shit rather than try to be her friend and like rise together. You know, like there's this weird like hatred between women often, and it is very strange. And I do think it is important for women to support each other. And you know, I think we see this a lot in like the left and people who are thinking about oppression and marginalization. You know, you even hear it around like, you know, Black people supporting other Black-owned businesses, like Asian folks supporting businesses run by fellow Asian people, like, you know, women supporting businesses run by other women, trans and queer folks supporting businesses run by trans and queer people, and like even just aside from business, but like just people supporting each other with their same identity group. And on one hand, like I get it, it makes sense. It's a survival mechanism. Right? Like if we do have an identity that sometimes has some barriers, perceived or real or mismatch of both, like it can feel soothing, and it can be soothing to get support and help from those communities and groups that we do share that identity. Absolutely. I think that's 100% a true thing, because sometimes people outside of our identity won't really understand what we're going through or won't understand like this or that. And so it makes sense to find that solace in those communities where we have a shared identity. At the same time, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I think, when I was younger, I was a lot more into this idea of shared identity and like, what does that mean? And like shared identity equals kinship, But I'll give you an example, right? So this has nothing to do with gender, but I remember an old friend from undergrad invited me to a wedding, and it was so fun. I was so happy to be invited, and I was placed at the table with the other tattooed people. I guess presumably because there was this idea that, all of us tattooed people would have something in common. And honestly, I was like, I hated my table. I was like, these people, like, oh my God, I have nothing in common with these people. They're all kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to talk shit on the podcast, but like, we just like, we're not birds of a feather, like, yes, we both had tattoos. We all had tattoos, but like, I was just not vibing. And so I think sometimes gender can be like that. I think sometimes race can be like that. I think sometimes, queerness can be like that, where it's like, just because you have something shared with somebody, it doesn't mean that you have anything in common. It doesn't mean that you're instantly going to get along. And I don't know, it's a tough one, right? Because like, on one hand, yeah, of course, women should support other women. But like, I think there's something that we don't talk about anymore, which is character. No one talks about character anymore. I don't ever hear anyone talking about it. I recently read this great book by this guy called Vivek Ramaswamy, and he is totally cool. He's kind of, I don't know, he's running for president right now with the Republicans, and I don't agree with everything he's saying in terms of like his running points, but I do agree with some of it. And I've read both of his books, Woke Inc. and Nation of Victims, and they're both fantastic. They're a lot more nuanced than what you'll see when he's a talking head on TV, so keep that in mind. I've read both of his books cover to cover. Yeah, they're both good. They're both like incredibly intelligent, incredibly nuanced in a way that you're not going to get from the guy when he's a talking head on Fox News, just so you guys know. But one of the things he talks about in Nation of Victims that I really, really love, and with a name like Vivek, obviously he's an Indian guy, and he talks a lot about excellence and the importance of having good character and the importance of moving with integrity rather than, just thinking that your identity is a stand-in for character. And that's something I think a lot about these days because, as you guys know, I've kind of taken a bit of a step far back from the far left, which is where I lived for a long time, because I've seen some craziness from the far left that honestly is a little bit like concerning, and like I'm sure I'll make an episode about that at some point. But within that far left woke culture, there's this idea that an identity is the most important thing about somebody. And if someone is a certain identity, then they're beyond criticism. They're beyond reproach. Who cares if they're an asshole? Who cares if they're like nasty? Who cares if they steal from everybody? Who cares if they're abusive? Oh, they have a marginalized identity, therefore they can do no wrong. And of course I'm being a little bit hyperbolic right now, but I have literally seen that, and it's fucking crazy. And so everyone is like wandering around with this like giant mallet of their identity, whacking people, and they're like, yeah, I'm XYZ identity, I'm this laundry list of things, and so therefore you can't criticize me. It doesn't matter if I'm a shitty person, you have to support me because I am an identity. And I don't agree with that. I think there was a time when I was afraid to speak out against that. There was a time when I was kind of like brainwashing myself with this rhetoric of like, oh yeah, identity is the most important thing. And I do think identity is important. Like, I would never say it's unimportant, but I do think that people of any identity can be amazing people. I think people of any identity can fucking suck. I think people of any identity can be inspiring and talented. I think people of any identity can be abusive pieces of shit. You know, just because someone is an identity does not mean that you have anything in common. It doesn't mean they deserve your support. You know, and so I think we all have to self-reflect if we are not vibing with someone, you know, and we have to see, is this because I am afraid of other women being successful and hot? Or am I kind of bristling at this person because she sucks as a human being, or she's rude, or she is conniving and, like, you know, manipulative and sneaky and says one thing and does another thing, or she's totally fake. And I think we have to be careful with this self-reflection, because I think, you know, it can be so easy to have an internalized misogyny where we are, like, basically decimating another woman out of our own internalized misogyny, our own internalized patriarchal ideas, where we're afraid to, you know, lap on praise to another woman because then we think there's going to be less praise left over for us. Of course, that is not true. Of course, the praise is infinite. There's enough for everyone. There's enough room for everyone. And so, you know, I think we have to be careful, because some of these criticisms that do get lapped at women all the time, it's like, oh, she's stuck up, oh, she's arrogant, oh, she's cocky, oh, she's so self-obsessed, she's a narcissist, when it's just like, oh yeah, I post pictures of my ass, I think I look amazing, like, bite me. Does that mean I'm a narcissist? No, it just means I love myself. Fucking get over it. And so I do think a lot of people are triggered when women love themselves in public. People are triggered when women are not self-deprecating or self-loathing or humble. And as you guys know, I don't believe in being inappropriately humble. I don't believe in being self-loathing at all. I believe in having a sober awareness of what we're good at and what we're not good at. And I think when we know we're hot, that just means we live in reality. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean we're cocky. Sometimes it's inappropriate to be humble. And so I think sometimes, especially around the issue of, like, women and other women, that can get confused. But I know when I meet a woman who unapologetically is like, yes, I'm sexy and so are you, and let's be best friends, I'm like, great, I love this. Because I love confident people, and I don't want to be around people who are going to be triggered by the fact that I'm confident. There's room for all of us to be confident. There's room for all of us to love ourselves. There's room for all of us to grow and expand and to be talented and to be amazing and beautiful and brilliant and just great. There's enough for all of us. There's enough love for all of us. There's enough glory for all of us. There's enough happiness for all of us. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. We're not in competition with each other. Right? And I do think someone's character is important. And I do think it's okay to decide, you know what, I don't think I'm compatible with that other woman because we're just on a different plane. There's a meme that I've seen going around, which I think is hilarious, and I reshare it whenever I see it because I think it's just so funny. And it says, I don't support all other women. Some of you bitches are crazy. And I think it's true. I think it's true. You know? And I don't think it's necessarily like a misogynist thing to say so. Like, I think, yeah, some women are crazy. Some women behave in weirdo ways. Some women are acting out their trauma in ways that are maybe not good. And the same can be said for men. Of course, you know, people are maybe judged differently, and I think it's important to be moving with an awareness of that. But I also don't think that we need to throw our brains out the window and just stop assessing who someone is as a person just because that person shares our identity. You know? When I've trusted people prematurely in the queer and trans community, I've gotten my ass handed to me and had some very unpleasant experiences with people who were fucking vicious for no reason against me. It was very traumatic, and I learned a lot from that. And so I've started to see these shared identity markers as what the novelist Kurt Vonnegut, who is really famous, he wrote Slaughterhouse-Five. I think that's his most famous book. It sounds so silly, but he's being silly on purpose, but he calls this a granfalloon. And you can Google this, there's like a whole Wikipedia about it. But from what I remember, his definition of a granfalloon is a shared identity that people think is like meaningful, but actually is meaningless. And so, I could see maybe some pushback against this being like, well, no, it's not meaningless that we're both women, like we both experience this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I think, yeah, that's true. In a lot of ways, it's true. But, I don't think that just because someone is a woman doesn't mean that we have to get along with them or support them without using our brain. So I think it's complicated, just like with anything. I think we have to think, we have to feel our intuition. We have to take a deep breath. It's like, yeah, there's some women that I think they're fucking stupid. There's some women who rub me the wrong way, where I'm like, this person is a charlatan. This person is a manipulative cult leader, and it makes me uncomfortable. Like, that, yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. And yet there's some other women that I'm like, wow, you're so inspiring, and I think you're like the coolest thing ever. And I think that can be true for any identity category, like we're not a monolith just because we have the same identity or some aspects of our identity that are the same. We see this in every single community, like disability community, of color communities, like blah, blah, blah. Everyone has these different ideas about what these identities mean. But at the end of the day, I do think it would be really cool if we all spent a lot more time thinking about character, integrity, honesty, being good people, and what does that mean? And I don't think being a good person always means being selfless. I see a lot of people talking about, being a good person, having good character means that you put everyone else before yourself, and I actually don't think that's true. I don't think being a martyr is the same thing as being a good person. But to go back to that book, Nation of Victims, I do believe there is something to be said about excellence, tenacity, perseverance, integrity, honesty. All of that is important too. It's not just our identity. And so I think that's something that's important to think about, like what is the quality of your character? And I don't think that can be measured by selflessness and humbleness whatsoever, especially when it comes to womanhood. Because it's actually kind of patriarchal to think that all women need to be this selfless, humble, self-deprecating people. There's room for us to be confident. There's room for us to love ourselves. And that also can mean that we have great character. I've had a lot of friendships end because people did not love themselves enough to live in reality. I've had 0 friendships end because someone else was confident and loved themselves. It's never happened. So that's just something to think about. Okay, friends, that's today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Secrets of a Witch podcast with me, Sabrina Scott. If you like this show, please share it with a friend. Please leave a review. I read them all, and it just means the world to me. If you love this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. If you don't love it, just stop listening. No one's forcing you to. There's other things to do. Internet is a big place. There's other podcasts. And of course, just a reminder that I've got 2 low-cost experiences coming up. One of them is Magic May. You can learn more about that at sabrinamscott.com/magicmay. There's also a podcast episode about it. And you can also check out sabrinamscott.com/recession for information about my recession era witchcraft masterclass. And there's a podcast episode about that too. So just click back a few episodes and you guys will find it. If you would like to learn more about my feminine energy course, that is going to be soft launching really soon. most vulnerable, expansive thing I've ever created. Scary, but awesome. Send me an email, ceo@sabrinamscott.com. And if you are looking for a cute hoodie to wear in this spring weather, go on over to shopsabrinamscott.com and check it out. If you haven't listened to this week's Tarot Vibe Forecast on YouTube, you're going to want to go check that out ASAP. Go on over to youtube.com/Sabrina Scott and click live. Okay, friends, that's it. Catch you on the flip side. Bye.